very interesting watching that now, isn't it? For some people, that's a point of optimism, but you were saying there that it felt at that time, dangerous.
It felt dangerous, but there was hope because our combat troops were handing over to the Afghan National Army for them to fight their own battles and for them to be in control. And now, 7 years on, that hasn't worked, and that hope is sort of ebbed away. We just talked to Penn Farthing, he fought in Helmand back in 2006, and he's appalled at what's been happening. And of course, we now, the chances of going back to Kabul are zilch. The chances of getting out of Kabul just feel desperate, don't they? Those chaotic scenes at the airport. One of the people that I met is former Colonel Ash Alexander-Cooper. He led multinational NATO teams during 8 tours of Afghanistan. And we can also this morning speak to women's rights activist Hasina Syed, who was evacuated from Afghanistan on Monday.
Monday of this week. Welcome to you both. Hasina, I'd love to talk to you about just your week, really, and how it's unfolded. Let's go back to a week ago today. Let's go back to last Friday. What was the picture like for you then? And tell me how quickly things changed from then until now.
First of all, I thank you for inviting me to speak up more. I think it's a very, very surprising. It's like it looked like I'm still in a shock, and it looked like I'm dreaming about it, that things which we thought about it, we never even thought that this scenario can happen that much soon. And things which happened to me and to my Afghan fellows, it's like a dream work. I never thought that it can happen so soon with my friends, with the people who has done a lot of development in Afghanistan, and then suddenly it goes to -0 to vanish. That's a bit shocking.
Ash, you have served on 8 tours in Afghanistan. There has been talk from some people this week, including the head of the British Armed Forces, that, well, maybe the Taliban have changed. Maybe they're not as brutal as they were in the late 90s. Do you think that is true, or do you think that is more a part of a very slick PR operation by the Taliban?
Good morning, Richard. If I could first just recognise the leadership of Penn. I think his interview was extremely emotional and compelling, and that is what leadership looks like. In the greatest traditions of the Royal Marines, he's showing incredible courage and integrity, and certainly not abandoning his people or leaving them behind. So just wanted to recognise that. But to your question about have they changed, I think we have to be very careful about being seduced by the rhetoric. The Taliban 2.0 PR machine is clearly much more slick than the 1990s version. They've learnt that, if nothing else. But the stories we are hearing from the places where TV cameras are not rolling should be equally chilling as they were back in the 90s for anybody who cares about women's rights or looking after those people who we have relied on for decades. Stories of targeted killings, house-to-house searches are happening as we speak, and there are many people in hiding because they know the moment our eyes are turned elsewhere or the world's gaze moves elsewhere, that they are absolutely at risk of being killed, or certainly retribution against their families and themselves.
Ash, we shook hands briefly in Kabul back in 2014. And I was just describing that was the point, it was a month before British combat troops left Afghanistan. We left trainers behind. We had huge hopes that the hundreds of thousands of Afghan soldiers would be able to take over. What went wrong that they were not able to stem the tide from the Taliban?
There will be far brighter and more well-versed people than me, I'm sure, will comment in time, but it looks to me from the conversations that I'm having with soldiers and policemen at various levels that it was ultimately a failure in leadership. The people I've worked with and many of my colleagues have worked with over decades have been the most brave, the most dedicated and loyal professional people with whom I've ever had the privilege to work anywhere in the world. And they did not abandon their posts in the way that some leaders are suggesting. The categorization that they all ran away is unfair and does a huge disservice to the pressures and the sacrifices they've made. Let's not forget over 60,000 police and army have lost their lives since 2001 fighting for their country. And it was only when it was clear that their political masters and other senior leaders had abandoned them that they had to focus, quite rightly and understandably, on protecting their families and trying to make sure that they could save their lives and not just be slaughtered as they would be if they'd stayed and fought right to the end in a vacuum.
Susanna, you're a businesswoman, you're a prominent women's rights campaigner. You were, as we explained, evacuated from Afghanistan on Monday. Can I ask you what it was like on the plane when you left?
It was it was very chaotic and terrified moment. And everybody was in a, as I mentioned before, that it was so much in a shock, in a painful, heartbreaking, that in this 20 years you built your country brick by brick with my international friends, with our international community. And then suddenly it goes in 1 minute, and then you leave behind your loved ones, your Afghan fellows, my Afghan countrymen, men and women. So everybody in the plane, we were crying so much, and even the youngsters, the youths, when I was looking at them, they were crying so much. They didn't know what will be our future, because you leave everything behind. Just like me, I left like with my paper of my office paper, and I just came with one of my clothes, and that's it. So it's a very painful time. It was very painful time, and it is very painful.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because one might assume that at the point you get on the plane to leave, that you're excited, that you're happy, that you've got out, but it isn't like that. The overwhelming feeling is one of sadness and fear for the colleagues and loved ones that you've left behind.
Exactly, because this is human nature. First, you have to think about yourself in regards to help others. So it maybe 2 minutes, 5 minutes, we become a bit relief with my other Afghan fellows. But then suddenly when the plane took off, everybody began to cry so much that we were even hugging ourselves just to calm ourselves down. But thanks to British soldiers, they have given us so much moral support that they are our heroes. I'm always thankful for them, the work which they have done and the work what they are doing right now.
Oh, and we wholeheartedly add our voices and our support to that, Hasina. And Ash Alexander-Cooper, I mean, that must make you emotional. You know, you've got British troops on the plane reassuring children, those who are desperate, sad about leaving, concerned. We've seen the pictures of soldiers being handed tiny children at the airport. I mean, this is difficult for them, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a huge emotional time for everybody. Just, as you said, there's the hope that they have a better life ahead of them. But the realization the moment they are lucky enough, if they can get onto the plane, that they are leaving behind everything they've worked so hard for is really desperate. And many of them, because of the crush that was described by Penn, have lost everything en route. They would, if they were told to bring one small carry-on bag to start their new life, many of them lost that in the crush. So they are literally getting on a plane with the clothes on their backs and a passport, in some cases not even a passport, but the clothes on their backs to start a brand new life. And it's extremely emotional. We've had one success a couple of nights ago. One of the families of a colleague that I've worked with for over 16 years, he managed to get to the airport despite all the odds, and he's landed in the UK with his family today. But he leaves behind a huge, everything he's worked for is now gone, and we have to make sure we pick up the pieces. And the next challenge, I think, and we need to focus on, is that the journey starts when they land here, really. They've come so far to even get to the UK, but once they land, we must not let them just fall into a system or become hidden. We've got to make sure that we ensure the start to their new life is positive, and we give them every support that we can.
Well, thank you, Ash. Thank you, Ash. And thank you, Hasina, for taking the time to talk to us. And that image of that baby with the soldier is so powerful, isn't it? We keep seeing as well. Thank you again to both of you. Lots more still to come. You're watching Good Morning Britain on ITV.
See you in a moment.